Good afternoon. My name is Dwight Hopkins, and I teach theology here at the Chicago Divinity School. In the absence of Richard Rosengarten, who is the academic dean of the Divinity School, I extend a warm welcome to this timely conversation on income inequality and religion in the United States. We first want to give acknowledgement and thanks to Miriam Renaud, who is a PhD student, and she's the one who conceived of this and organized today's gathering. In fact, Miriam models how the future of the Academy is already now, and also how our PhD students are already making a difference by bridging academic conversations with broader conversation. The University of Chicago Divinity School is a premier global educational institution that takes seriously the academic study of religion. And by that we mean we take seriously the best scholarly research, the importance of an interdisciplinary methodology, collaborative teamwork, rigorous engagement, cutting-edge questions, and engagement with the public. That is to say, something is at stake in the scholarly research about religion, and this research has implications, in fact, profound implications for the broader public. And so we welcome this distinguished panel of scholars from the University of Chicago and from Northwestern University. And we look forward to an engaging and enlightening discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hopkins, for those kind words. So again, I'm Miriam Renaud, a PhD candidate here at the Divinity School and the organizer of this symposium. Thank you so much for coming in spite of the weather. So I was inspired to organize this event when I attended a talk here at the university by economist Emmanuel Saez on income and wealth inequality. So I realized that there was inequality, I just didn't realize just how bad it was. A respondent to Saez, a University of Chicago sociologist emeritus, then advanced the opinion that he thought that the best way to address this problem was to have people from various disciplines come together and work on the problem. So he named several disciplines he would have wanted to see at the table, but left off religion. So today's symposium is my attempt to essentially bring scholars, eminent scholars from various disciplines, and give them a chance to be in conversation and include religion in that conversation. Before I introduce the presenters, I want to take a minute or two to explain the format of today's event. Our 5 presenters, we're missing one, but hopefully our 5th one will appear. They will spend 15 minutes giving an overview of their research as it relates to the question of income inequality and when applicable to religion in the United States. We will then take a 15-minute break. When we return, Professor Hopkins will moderate a conversation between the presenters for 50 minutes. Then for the next 30 minutes, you will have a chance to ask questions by lining up at a mic that Bill Gerasi, our AV expert, is going to have set up in the back of the room. And I ask that when you line up that you give priority to University of Chicago students. So we will end promptly at 5, after which you will be invited to continue the conversation in the common room on the first floor, where an open bar and hot appetizers will be available until 6:30. The Martin Marty Center generously provided funds for this event. So I will now introduce the moderator and the 5 presenters, but we'll do so extremely briefly in order not to bleed into their presentation time, which is a tough assignment given the length of their CVs and the caliber of their accomplishments. So to speed things along, I created a handout with short but more ample synopses of their academic contributions. If you don't have one of those handouts, they were available on the table just outside the entrance to the lecture hall. So it is now my great privilege to introduce our moderator and presenters, all of whom I might add have volunteered their valuable time to be here with us today. Dwight Hopkins, our moderator, is professor of theology at Chicago's Divinity School. Professor Hopkins is interested in multidisciplinary approaches to the academic study of religious thought through the lenses of culture, politics, and economics. He's the founder of a 14-country network of experts dedicated to thinking about practices for building healthy communities and fostering healthy individuals in those communities. He is the author of many books, including Being Human, Race, Culture, and Religion. Evelyn Brodkin is Associate Professor at Chicago School of Social Service Administration. Professor Brodkin is also the Director of Chicago's Poverty and Inequality Program. On leave from the university this year, she is the Moses Distinguished Visiting Professor at the Silberman School of Social Work, Hunter College in New York City. Her research interests include welfare state politics and policies at the level of the state and the street, with a focus on political organizational responses to poverty, inequality, and marginalization. Amir Sufi is a Bruce Lindsay Professor of Economics and Public Policy at Chicago's Booth School of Business. Professor Sufi is also a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. His recent research focuses on household debt and the economy. Policy-making institutions like the Federal Reserve have taken an interest in his findings. His book, House of Debt, co-written with Atif Mian in 2014, and lauded by the likes of Paul Krugman, analyzes the causes of the Great Recession and explores how the real estate debt bubble exacerbated inequality. Paola Sapienza is a Donald C. Clark HSBC Chair in Consumer Finance at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. Professor Sapienza is also a faculty fellow at the Zell Center for Risk Research and a research fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Her research interests include banking and financial institutions, as well as behavioral economics and behavioral finance and more. A widely published scholar, she disseminated some of her findings on the way religion impacts economic decisions in a journal article memorably entitled People's Opium, Religion, and Economic Attitudes. William Schweiker is the Edward L. Ryerson Distinguished Service Professor of Theological Ethics at Chicago's Divinity School. Professor Schweiker is also the director of the Enhancing Life Project, a 2-year endeavor dedicated to identifying how better to support the aspirations of people and communities for enriched lives. His research focuses on theological and ethical questions related to global dynamics, comparative religious ethics, and the history of ethics. The author of many books, his current project is entitled Religious Ethics, Meaning and Method. Luigi Zingales is the Robert C. McCormick Distinguished Service Professor of Entrepreneurship and Finance at Chicago's Booth School of Business. Professor Zingales is also the director of Chicago's Stigler Center, which among other issues studies special interest groups and how they distort a capitalist economy. His research interests span corporate governance to financial development, political economy, to the economic effects of culture. He has written several best-selling books, including A Capitalism for the People, which analyzes the current American economy, what's wrong with it, and how to fix it. Please join me now in giving our presenters and moderator a round of applause. So let's get started.
Just up. Just up. Yeah. Well, thanks for the lovely introduction, and thank you for putting this together. My thanks to Miriam and the Marty Center for organizing something that I believe is incredibly timely and very important. And I may even be able to show you some
We're going to
slides.
sit over there so we can see the slides. We'll come back up for that. Yeah.
Okay. poverty and inequality are now at the center of our political agenda in a way that I think we haven't seen for nearly 50 years. It's not that the issues weren't serious before. It's not that poverty and inequality just happened, but they have become of acute political interest at this moment. Political theory tells us that these moments come infrequently, and when opportunities for political and policy change open up by virtue of this kind of attention, we should seize that moment. So I especially appreciate that, in effect, we are finding one way to seize the moment by directing our attention here to this dialogue. I'm going to share some observations with you about equality, democracy, and religion, drawing on my research on poverty in the US and comparative welfare state politics in Europe. As you will quickly see, I'm not a scholar of religion. And as I was telling Miriam, preparing for this symposium actually gave me the opportunity to look at some of the things I'd studied and look at them with a slightly different lens and see if I could begin to get a glimpse of where religion came into the picture. So I'm going to try out some of that with you today in a very tentative way, and I look forward to the dialogue. In 15 minutes, I'm going to give you an extensive and profound discussion of these issues. Oh, wait. I'm going to move very quickly and cross the surface of some very difficult and profound issues. But I think at least we can get the ball rolling on some of these. I thought it would be helpful just to get the lay of the land. By beginning with some data. In the US, we have a poverty rate of 14.8%. Too much? Too little? Well, it's almost 47 million people. You can take whatever standard you want. If you look over time, 1996 to 2014, you see that since the poverty has been increasing, and not just with the recession. I think, in a way, more interesting, perhaps, is the extent to which deep poverty has increased. And deep poverty is a household living at half the poverty rate. Now, the poverty rate for a family with one adult and two kids is about $19,000. Half the poverty rate is about $9,500. 6.6% of the population is living at under $10,000 a year. So consider that. But maybe more people are certainly above the poverty rate, but the poverty rate's a line. It's just, I can discuss later if you want where we come up with it, but it's a line. And if you have $1 more, you're not poor, $1 less, you're poor. Well, let's take a look at people living at 150% of poverty. And again, we're talking about $20,000 for a family of 3. So here we're talking about $30,000. And that's a quarter of the population. Think of living on that in Chicago. Not easy. Now, in addition, poverty is not distributed evenly across the population. The risk of being poor varies unequally. It is higher among people of color, it is higher among women, and it is higher among children. We have a child poverty rate of 20%. When I give talks on this in Europe, people find it hard to believe this could be true in such an affluent society that 1/5 of our kids live in poverty. You'll hear a great deal today about income inequality, which is growing. The top 1% is doing better all the time, and the rest are not. Again, the 1%ers actually, we're almost back to the roaring 20s in terms of income inequality and the wealth going to the top 1%. Now, in addition to economic inequality, I want us to think a little bit about political inequality as well. It may seem like a different domain. It is different but related. Consider that in a democracy, the premise is one that builds on equality of voice. And equality of voice occurs through a variety of means, but the one we know best is one person, one vote, or one adult, one vote, as children who wish they could vote remind me. So I want to look briefly at inequality in the democratic electoral legislative system, but we also have a form of inequality I call street level inequality. And that involves inequality of voice at the places where the non-wealthy, non-affluent actually meet the state. In the welfare offices, the police departments, the schools, the hospital clinics. The people, the have-nots, aren't involved in politics in Congress, in the halls of Congress. That's where the lobbyists are. If they have a voice at all, it will be at the level of the street. So I want to very briefly talk about that. I can go into it more later if we have time. Electoral inequality. Basically, electoral participation maps pretty strongly onto socioeconomic status. It's a short version. It doesn't map perfectly, but it maps remarkably well. And of course, we're all familiar with Citizens United and the relative weight of the wealthy and corporations in campaign finance, which affects who can run for office effectively. We also have evidence of inequality in legislative outcomes. If the electoral system worked well, you would see a certain amount of equality in electoral outcomes. But Martin Gilens at Princeton has done some incredibly interesting work on this and basically finds that what the top 10% of the income groups prefer in terms of policy doesn't matter. Even what the median income citizen thinks about policy doesn't matter if they disagree with the most affluent. What the interests of affluent groups dominate in the electoral legislative process. We can't say this completely, I'm overstating a bit, but there's a lot of evidence that points to inequality in politics and in political outcomes. Actually, Gilens says, a government that is democratic in form, but in practice is not responsive to is responsive to only its most affluent citizens, is a democracy in name only. So now we're talking about inequality as undermining the principles of our very democracy. And I think this has gotten far too little attention. Street level inequality. This is the classic, you name it, unemployment office, welfare office, social service office. You have an equal opportunity to be smashed into line, wait a long time, and treated without great responsiveness. I've spent many hours in welfare offices doing ethnographic research. It's not a far cry from this. At the street level, people who may not have a voice in the halls of Congress, maybe that's where they can get their interests met. Maybe that's where they can make a claim on the state for the kinds of help that would reduce inequality. Is that possible? Well, again, my research and that of others in the field of street level research find, in fact, equality is amplified, reflected, even intensified in street level encounters. On occasion, it gets so bad that people rebel. So, they rebel against the police, They rebel against the schools. But when you think about voice, look what that takes. You're not cutting a check to a political party. You're not pushing a lever. You're not having a nice lunch as a lobbyist. You put your body on the line to have voice in that domain. So this is yet another form of inequality in our democracy. We have a broader political dilemma. Economic inequality undermines democracy, yet a thriving democracy is necessary to address inequality. The latter part of this statement I draw from research on European welfare state politics, in which we see there are vicious cycles in which unequal resources for social citizenship and political voice decrease the probability of having state policies that will address inequality. A zero-sum politics. The alternative is a virtuous cycle with broadly shared resources for social citizenship and voice, and greater government intervention to address inequality. I have many slides which will show you what I call the state is the indispensable actor, but I will simply move quickly. Child poverty, after the state intervenes, Denmark on one end, the US on the other end. Income inequality, after the state intervenes, the US on one end, Denmark on the other end. I do a lot of research in Denmark. Distribution of wealth, the US, and inequality, the US on one end, everybody else on the other end. And here, it's hard to look at quickly, but basically, the top, the yellow, is inequality before government intervenes, and the blue is decreased inequality after government intervenes across countries in the OECD. What government does matters. And yet, we have inequality of political voice. There's the conundrum. More evidence, child poverty rates as a function of government spending. So I've left myself 3 minutes to talk about religion. I'm sure we'll have more discussion later. Where does religion figure into this? I went back to look at a lot of the research I'd done on welfare reform in the US, touted as a success by some, I think a great moral and practical failure that is evidenced in a variety of ways, including the increase in deep poverty. Welfare only provided a poverty level income, but deep poverty happens when you don't even have that. And Hugh Heclo has said that government policy and religious matters aren't the same thing, but they're not in isolation from each other. They both claim to give authoritative answers to important questions about how people should live. So I found this wonderful transcript of a conversation between Mary Jo Bain, who resigned from the Clinton administration in protest over welfare reform, and Larry Mead, a political scientist and colleague who was one of the champions of welfare reform, requiring work and time-limiting cash assistance. And they were asked to talk about religion. Mary Jo invoked religion from the perspective of a charitable, generous, and unconditionally loving approach. Larry, not so much. He said Jesus expects the poor to come to him and ask for things and assumes they can deal with life. They're responsible for their life. There shouldn't be protective measures for the poor. Jesus says, in fact, doesn't argue for preferential treatment and admonishes them about what they should do next. What I'm suggesting here is that religion is invoked in behalf of points of view that are pre-existent. I'm not sure religion changes views, but I'm open to hearing about it. There's more from Larry. Also, the welfare bill provided a charitable choice provision that sought to allow state-funded welfare programs to be administered by faith-based organizations. The idea is that the church can do it better. They'll understand better, they're more generous, they're closer to the people. The short story is, at the end of it, there were minimal changes in the way services were provided. Some faith-based organizations really tried their best and did some remarkable things. I think of the Black storefront churches as an amazing example. But they worried a lot about being co-opted and being used to deflect anger against these policies, and even being asked to be undercover cops for the states flushing out dark income in the economy. So they were in a very tough spot trying to become agents of the state. So I conclude with some words from politics about the relationship between democracy and inequality. We stand committed to the proposition that freedom's no half and half affair. If the average citizen is guaranteed equal opportunity in the polling place, he must have equal opportunity in the marketplace. Governance can err, but divine justice weighs the sins of the cold-blooded and the sins of the warm-hearted in different scales. Better the occasional faults of a government that lives in a spirit of charity than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in the ice of its own indifference. There is a mysterious cycle in human events, to some generations much is given, of others much is expected. This generation has a rendezvous with destiny. Some of you already know who said this. Franklin Roosevelt, 1936, following the Great Depression. It rings as true now. Thank you.